Today we will talk about databases and show you how to use them on MySQL example. Let's begin. All will be available on GitHub repository. This is the course that presents how works in practice and how to connect some part of the system. Today we will talk about databases, especially MySQL. If we need to project an application connection to the internet, we need a database. A database is a collection of digitally recorded data. The Database Management System, DBMS, is responsible for handling this structured data. Databases can be compared to tables in Excel. The data in the databases are placed in columns and rows, which allows for quick information retrieval. For this we use queries. Of course, we need to secure our data by managing privileges and by the right configuration connection and storage system. There are a lot of database types such as object-oriented databases, characterized by representing information in the form of objects. Relational databases, it is a collection of tables that can be linked into relationships with each other. Inside the tables, we can give the rows keys. These are primary and foreign keys. Data warehouses mainly hold large amounts of data. This type is mainly used for data queries and analyses. Distributed databases consists of two or more files that are in different places. NoSQL databases, these are non-relational databases that can handle large amounts of data. They are used to create modern applications thanks to flexible schemes. The most popular is the relationship database. In there, the most popular is MySQL. The second most popular is PostgreSQL. MySQL has better support, also it's faster. Postgres, however, has more indexes, has more alerts before critical changes, and has more possibilities, like UUID field or difference between schema and databases. Of course, there are much more database engines, however we will not discuss all of them in this video. We need only to make choices, and for me, the support factor is one of the biggest if you are learning a new thing. MySQL is open source and free software. It is constantly developed and supported by Oracle Corporation. MySQL is named after the co-founder Monty Wendiziu and the SQL abbreviation. The system is chosen primarily for its speed, ease, and reliability. In many databases, there are column types, by the general defined to numeric, string, Boolean, data, and special types. In MySQL we have many different types. List of most of them is shown currently on the screen. The most popular types are varchar, datetime, date, text, enum, int, tint, bytint, float, decimal, char. These types are also most common, supported by many ORM systems. Probably that's the reason why those types are used more often than others. To create a database we need the first project and think about the database schema. To do that there are uses schematics called Unified Modeling Language UML in short. Those schematics show what table we will use and how they will be connected. This can be made on paper or in any program created for that. Of course we can just make it in our mind, however in a more complex system that could be difficult. In this video, we will create a simple schema just to present how databases work and what are possibilities. We will create a database for the simple game. So what do we need? We need to table users. We will have their email that will be used to log in, password, role that has user because there are often admins, players, and could be more, activation flags. We also need table players that are connected to the user account and have a score, name, date when was created, information if it's active, and level where is some player. We also need a table level with the number of levels, the name of it, and the path to the image of it. The level should be connected to player and player to user. Can be many players on the same level, so here is a relation many to one. We will allow having only one character in each account, so relation users to players are 1 to 1. Of course, we always can add more columns or tables in a later phase if we need to, and I will show how to do it later. And remember, in your application could be completely different assumptions. This is a decision based on business needs. Subscribe to our channel and like this video and comment if you want more content like this. Now let's start. You can set up MySQL local in many ways, however, I recommend Docker to set up the environment. I have prepared Docker Compose files to make a faster setup for your environment. If you have installed Docker and Docker Compose, then after downloading out the project on GitHub, you need just to type in the command line Docker Compose. However, that version allows you only to manipulate the database and browse this by command line. To run the project, we need the first download from our GitHub. URL to our repository is in the description below. To download the project by command git clone https://github.com/codemasters2021/mysql. Git in the directory where you want to save the project. Then we can run cp env local env, that's copy configuration to our local project. And then Docker Compose override myadmin YML or Docker Compose override adminer YML can be copied to Docker Compose override YML. However, I have copied both adminer and myadmin to file Docker Compose override YML to show you both of them and what you should use. Then simple Docker Compose up D and simply wait to finish the download. After the download is done, we want to check if our containers are set correctly. We can do that by command Docker Compose ps, and there we have a table that shows the status of all containers. They are all okay. So how to use the container? As we can see, the status of all containers is up, which means the container is currently running. The status could be also restarting or stop. Now how we can use those containers? We can go inside the container by using the name that is shown in this table. We need to use the command docker exec at container_name, and command that we want to make on the container in our case will be docker exec at database mysql user p database. That means we connect to the database called database using the user called user. All that parameters are set in our env file. Don't forget to type the password from env file. We will be back here later. For now we learn just how to exit it. To exit from the MySQL command line, just type exit and tap enter. We can also go to the command line inside by command docker exec at database mysql bash, and there we can type the command mysql by mysql user p database. That gets us back to the MySQL command line. To check what databases we have run show databases, we will see our database called database. Let's select the database by the command use database and check tables by show tables. Of course empty, don't worry, soon we will fill it. In our project, phpMyAdmin is set on port 8080. So we can check it by put localhost 8080 in a browser. My default language is French. I change language to English to be more clear to you. We need to type user and password. phpMyAdmin is easy to manage and has many visual representations, which makes this tool great for beginners. However, it takes much memory from the computer, so it isn't a good idea for a weak computer or in case many other components also take memory and leave us with little to nothing. In our project, Admirer is set on port 8087. So we can check it by put localhost 8087 in a browser. My default language is French. I change language to English to be more clear to you. We have to change the database connection, for that from Docker Compose YML file. We need to type user and password. Adminer is debug tool to debug databases and make on it needed operations. Both applications have easy to use interface. I will present to you how to create tables in Adminer, and we will create a schema. Schema is a structure with all necessary tables. Let's select our database called database. Now click create table. Let's type the table name. As you remember, we need to create the table users. Now we need to fill all fields names, select type and check another option if it's needed. Let's set patient_ID and ID for table players as a string to show later how to use UUID. And now let's repeat the process for the rest tables. To table called level, we will use the number as a unique number that is the primary key without auto-increment to give us more control. Auto-increment can make numeration out of control in MySQL. I will show you this problem in section delete. All set and down. Now we need to understand how works relations in MySQL. We will focus on relation database. Relation in the database is a connection between two tables by a foreign key, which is a connection to ID in another table. For example, when we have table article that have columns, title, description, date created, owner, and category. In that scenario, owner and category are foreign keys. They are the only number that is the same as the number in column ID in table user for owner case, and table category for category case. That gives us access to much more information than only basic information, such as the owner's email address. Relationship are defined by 1 to 1 makes as 1 with 2 dots 1 to many marked as 1 with 2 dots and letter N, many to 1 marked as letter N with 2 dots and 1, and last many to many marked as letter N with 2 dots and letter N. This last gives us the most possibilities, however it's the most difficult to manage, also it's often impossible to create such connection, so to do that we create a table that has two one-to-many connections that connect tables that we wanted to be connected by many-to-many relationships. In MySQL we mark as keys as foreign key or primary key. The database also has indexes. By default all foreign keys and ID columns have indexes, however, we can add more or remove some. Indexes tell the database what should be focused on when we are searching. So it's a good idea to make indexes in place from where we are the most often searching data. It's good to know that indexes are often more effective on columns where are many repeaters, or when we are sure that can't be two the same value in the same column. We should use index unique, for example email for the user. It's worth mentioning that there are many types of index, and they are different in different types of database. It's good to know them, however, it's top for more experienced programmers. In MySQL we can create an index by command create index. Now let's back to our MySQL command line. Oh, we forget to add column date underscore create to table users. Nothing lost. Let's see how we can correct our mistakes. So now it's time to add that column. To do that we will use alter table. Okay, let's fix that error. We also didn't add keys and indexes, so let's do that. Empty tables without data are rather useless. We need to know how to fill rows in tables. We do that by command insert inside the MySQL command line. We need to add level. Let's try the command. Now at the player, it's a good time to practice with UUID. If column ID is marked as auto_insert, we don't need to type it in columns. ID could be added manually, and it's often done if we use UUID. This has many advantages, such as storage and manipulating data relations from the backend by sending insert to many tables with all relations at the same time. In ID as auto_insert, that's impossible, because we don't know what is ID before we send insert. Notice command UUID, which generates a unique string called UUID. Let's add 2 users to see how we can add many rows at once. Notice command MD5, that command encodes the string. We shouldn't ever store plain passwords in the database. Also important is the ability to change data in the database, and we can do that by command update. To try to make a simple change, we can make many changes by listing all changes, separate them by a comma. Just check the change in our example. And most often used will be select, which gives us the possibility to see what is in the database. At first, we will use select to check if our record is updated, how it should be. To select be useful in practice, it's very often used with phrase where this gives us the possibility of filtering data. Let's check. Now we should extend possibilities of select by checking how work statement join in MySQL. When we need data based on 2 or more tables, we need joins. In MySQL we use join statement with on that conditions on what we want to join, usually it's table foreign key equals to table 2 ID. There are 4 kinds of joins: inner join, outer join, left join, right join. Types determine if join should include not existing rows or not. Inner join is used to get rows that both exist, that's the default, so if we use join that means that configuration will be used. Full join gets rows that both exist or one of them exists. Left join gives rows that exist on the left part of the equation. Right join get rows that exist on the right part of the equation. Now we will do selects with joins. In our structure, we have a relationship between table users and table players, so we can get information from both tables. So let's try select asterisk from users you join patients P on, U, player underscore ID equals P, ID. We can see here aliases U from user and P from players, that we definite just to make faster types and unique names. Okay, to see the difference between join and left join, let's search for users that don't have registered players. With the result of the previous query, we see 1, not 2 results. So now by simple where, we can find users without players. Of course, we also can select asterisk from users where player underscore ID is null. To get the same effect, however, this example it's to presents a simple difference with results depending on the type of join, and as we can see we get less information. Remember that's in MySQL is easy to make problems with performance if you are using where with many conditions. Sometimes you need to define query for more queries, but to be sure use the statement explain before the query, which gives us many details about time consumptions and index uses. How to delete? Let's try. In MySQL we use the statement delete. Let's delete a user without a player. Let's check the situation by using select. Notice that the equal sign doesn't work with null. To compare we need to use is_null. Okay, now let's add again the same record. Let's select again. Have you seen something odd? Check ID. MySQL remembers which time you add a record, and that determines what ID will be added, so after manipulations in data that ordinarily numbers may be rather messy. There could be two types of paginations: by table with pages and by infinite scroll. To make possible pagination by page, we need to determine the number of rows to show on page. In MySQL, it's defined by limit. We also need to define the page by offset. If we want infinite scroll, we need to imitate page pagination on the front-end site by using a scroll that changes the page. It's also possible that we will use ELASTICSEARCH, that is the system with a NoSQL database that has different searching systems and pagination by chunk system, and roll them over and over. Elasticsearch is a big topic that needs another video. To make possible sorting in tables in MySQL, we use order by. In sorting, we need to define two parameters. One is the column that we sort, and the second is the direction that could be ascending by ASC or descending done by desc. Now we will do selects with orders and limits. If your website or offline application needs tables with paginations, that's a table with the possibility of switching pages, then you will need to use order and limit in MySQL. Let's imagine that you have a list of users that shows only one user on each page. Okay, let's ask yourself who should be on the first page. Order by determining that, and limit sets page number and number of elements. Let's assume that users should be sorted by email alphabetic. Select asterisk from users order by email desk limit 1. It could be also select asterisk from users order by email desk limit 0, 1. Okay, now let's check the second page. Select asterisk from users order by email desk limit 1, 1. Okay, why one element on the first page was limit 0, 1 and on the second limit 1, 1? The answer is simple. Computer counts from 0, so the first page is number by 0, the second is 1, and so on. Subquery is a very useful function that allows more flexibility while searching, which also can be a kind of alternative to joining. Just check the command. Select you, asterisk from users you join players P on, you, player underscore ID equals P, ID, where P, name equals player. And another command now without join. Select asterisk from users where player underscore ID in, select ID from players where name equals player. Both show the same user. In some cases, the subquery is faster, especially if you are joined to a table with a big number of rows. A subquery can be used for a different part of the query and is easy to read. However, try to avoid too long queries. In many cases, it's better to define more queries and use results. To make more advanced query, we can group results and add conditions about the group by statement having. To make the presentation more clear, I have added a few more rows to the user table. Let's check some examples. Having determinate conditions on the group while we're determining the condition to each row. So now it's time for the rest more advanced MySQL topics. We of course should be aware of how to make our database safe. We can do that by some topic. However, of course, security is a very wide topic, and its change depends on the situation and progress in time. The privilege system. How works the privilege system? That is the system to define what database user has to what table and what range access. Just remember that's good practice to give fewer privileges. If possible, it's good to have a user that has access only for reading data only for one database and make different users handle the rest. A good example of how to handle it is by image two applications, one to create content for the blog and second only to browse it. The second application should even know about the existing user that can manage content. In MySQL, we use command grant privileges and flush privileges. Backups. It's good practice to make backups regularly. Many server services offer backup, however, we should be asking how often they do that and if the backup is stored on the same machine. We shouldn't be stored it on the same machine, because if will be a problem, then we cannot get access to original data and backup. In MySQL, we use command mysqldump to create a backup, and to recover data just command MySQL. Of course, there is much more topic about databases, however, I will only signal them to be aware of existing them. They are more advanced and many of them are not recommended to be used, because they can do extra place to business logic that's difficult to follow and to debug and often not that easy to be aware of. Procedures. How to work stored procedures. Putting database-intensive operations into stored procedures lets you define an API for your database application. You can reuse this API across multiple applications and multiple programming languages. This technique avoids duplicating database code, saving time and effort when you make updates due to schema changes, tuning the performance of queries, or adding new database operations for logging, security, and so on. In MySQL, we use create procedure to create procedure and call to use it. Views. MySQL supports views, including updatable views. Views are stored queries that when invoked produce a result set. A view acts as a virtual table. In MySQL, we use create view to create the view and select to use it. Triggers. A trigger is a named database object that is associated with a table, and that activates when a particular event occurs for the table. Some uses for triggers are to perform checks of values to be inserted into a table, or to perform calculations on values involved in an update. To create a trigger or drop a trigger, use the create trigger or drop trigger statement. Of course, the commands need specific parameters. To learn them and see how to use them, we recommend checking official documentation. For MySQL, its website, https://mysql.com/doc, and there choose the version that you use. Hopefully, you will like videos like this, and remember to subscribe, leave the like, and comment. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video.